Vavi's perspective.
Ever since I was a chick, I'd always been fascinated by the great void above us. At first, it was the colorful pinprick lights themselves to which I directed my awe. Before even shedding my hatchling plumage, when other children were just picking up how to spell star, I had already begun reading about their nature. That of behemoths many magnitudes larger than Arquisa itself calling out to us from light years away, dotting our sky night by night with their ancient love letters. However, upon learning about the possibilities for entire planets beyond our own solar system, my eyes fell away from their distant brilliance, and instead fixated on the darkness between them. Many of our scientists speculated about the existence of other planetary bodies beyond Holm's embrace. Some said it simply wasn't possible, citing studies, scriptures, and spurious syllogisms alike. Others, like me, believed the opposite. We couldn't possibly be alone. Even if planetary systems were 1 in a billion, that would still inevitably result in many more like our own. From my early adolescence onward, I dreamed endlessly about what could be out there. Out of all these fantasies, no prospect was more salient than that of alien life. Focusing my studies on astronomy and biology alike, I continued throughout my education to speculate about the existence of other people amongst the stars. For my final research project, I wrote a 14-page paper on the theoretical science of planetary life, and designed several figurines representing what form alien intelligence might take. Cloacus seemed at the time like a foregone conclusion. The brain-to-body ratio needed for sapience just wasn't feasible with live birth. Eggs were obviously the only viable option. From that, I concluded that aliens would most likely resemble inathalans, a kingdom of animal containing egg layers with milk-producing thala glands. It was this classification to which our own species, the Kafel, belonged. I also began theorizing about blood coloration. While most other people held the assumption that it would be purple like our own, I subscribed to a somewhat more controversial hypothesis. The reason our blood had its dark purple color was due to its mixture of copper-based and iron-based oxygen transport molecules. However, since iron was more effective at the job, it made sense that barring any evolutionary shenanigans, blood would be entirely red. A lot of people refuted this as unrealistic, but they did so on the usual assumption that life outside our planet would be just like us, and likewise would suffer similar evolutionary pressures. My paper apparently whipped up some gust in the scientific community, and only a few months after graduation, I was extended an offer by the National Museum of Astronomy to serve as a speaker and tour guide. It's pretty solid work with good pay, and it lends a nice pinch of credibility to studies with my name on them. Occasionally, I'd even been contacted by the military to help them prototype space-based technology, including our species' first artificial satellite, the Glitterwing. Though our creation had only remained in orbit for a few months, nevertheless, it was a major achievement in modern science. So initially, when I was invited to the Telkeki military base for a top-secret project, my assumption had been that they needed me to help design a new satellite, or something of that nature. Then again, with the war still raging on in full swing, I wasn't sure what astronomy developments could possibly be so important as to warrant the waste of valuable resources. Nothing could have possibly prepared me for what I was to encounter there. The strange, bullet-shaped vehicle didn't look anything like our current aircraft, or even the theoretical space vehicles I'd seen in research articles. The night before, I'd read in the local newspaper about a mysterious, unidentified object crashing on the Sook family farm. Fearful speculation about it being an experimental weapon from Providence spread like wildfire. However, seeing the massive object up close, there could be no doubt it wasn't from our world. Everything beyond that point felt like a blur. Ushered inside the mysterious capsule by clandestine figures, I was utterly speechless to find myself stood over the corpse of an unfamiliar creature. On first glance, it shared some similarities with the Borthanen kingdom, hairy and clearly lacking in the biological features necessary for egg-laying. However, though this one was evidently male, the presence of rudimentary thala glands confirmed what I had already known from the moment I stepped into the ship. This being wouldn't fit into any of our evolutionary categories because it didn't evolve on our planet. It was an alien. A real, in-the-flesh extraterrestrial. Analyzing the biology of an alien species was the sort of thing my childhood dreams were made of. Apparently, as a prominent voice in theoretical astrobiology, I was chosen to bear witness to this dissection. Holven, the award-winning biologist who'd been called in for the operation itself, took eternities to prepare. His fastidious claw-washing, while commendable, was driving me mad with impatience. At the very least, however, his glacial pace provided me plenty of time to analyze the corpse's surface. Those eyes are a bit closer together than ours. Definitely provides better depth perception, but also probably limits the field of vision more. Smoothing my palm across the skin of his shoulder, I noticed a strange oiliness to it, perhaps some kind of decay beginning to set in. When Holven finally entered the room, I grabbed him by the arm and practically dragged him over to begin his work. Carefully removing from his tool bag a very well-maintained scalpel, the doctor methodically searched for an ideal incision spot before finally beginning the procedure. I was on the verge of passing out with elation. Regardless of our findings, this dissection would go down in history as the first ever anatomical analysis of extraterrestrial intelligence. The end results of this experiment, however, would leave me conflicted. As the surgical instrument's glinting edge carved down our guest's upper chest with perfect ease, a single drop of crimson fluid dripped down onto the floor. My resulting chirp of excitement clearly blew Holven off balance, prompting from the biologist an unamused glare the likes of which I could no longer find in me to care about. One of my historical idols was sometimes cited as saying to his colleagues, "Cheer when you are proven wrong, for that means we just proved something." As a scientist, I'd always done my best to take those words to heart, to always remain loyal to evidence and not allow my own ego to blind me. That being said, I was beyond ecstatic for my red blood hypothesis to be proven true. However, my state of enraptured vindication was cut off rather quickly by the abrupt introduction of new and deeply unexpected data. While my blood hypothesis might have been true, it turned out that our initial notion regarding the corpse being a corpse was very much false. Fortunately, our botched first contact with alien life didn't end with any casualties. Holven got launched back pretty far by the creature's kick, but ultimately he seemed far more concerned with the damage he had inflicted than that given to him in return. Fortunately, I was well enough trained in medical science to properly stitch shut the wound we had opened in our ignorance. Beyond that, however, we were forced to vacate the area while on-site doctors did their best to ensure we hadn't caused lasting damage. It felt strange to leave the alien alone in his ship after what we had just done to him, but the intelligence official on site assured us that it was for the best. So, for the next few hours, we could only watch from a hidden camera as the extraterrestrial slowly regained himself. With Holven still out of commission from a bruised rib and official diplomats not yet on site, I was decided to be the ideal candidate for an impromptu introduction. The soldiers escorting me had apparently planned to enter alongside in order to ward against further hostilities from our captive. Thankfully, after reminding those morons that he was only defending himself from our attack, I was able to convince the officers of a less threatening approach. All things considered, my first interaction with human actually went extremely well. Though mutually frightened at first by each other's presence, we very quickly had begun to communicate. Just from looking at his ship, it was clear that whatever species human belonged to was centuries ahead of our own in terms of technological advancement. Prior to his awakening, physicists from the facility were able to acquire 2 large canisters of antimatter, something that, up until now, had been entirely theoretical. To me, however, the most incredible piece of technology harbored aboard that vehicle was its computer. Whereas our best computers took up entire rooms for meager calculations, this one was smaller than human himself, yet clearly held utility and power, and the likes of which every computer on Arquisa combined would struggle to match. It was through this strange and wonderful machine that I was made the first member of my species to see our planet in all its glory, not just as some blurry, pixelated blob, but in perfect, mind-bending detail. However, even more astonishing to me was the image of his own planet, Earth. It was a beautiful place, packed with lush green landscapes and dark blue seas, a spiritual elder sister to own home. The prospect of being able to learn from such wise creatures as the inhabitants of Earth filled me with unparalleled drive. I wanted to know everything about where human came from, not just their science, but their culture and history too. As luck would have it, the human's computer held yet another function to help with this objective. An AI, again, something we hadn't even begun to look into, designed to help understand language. Once human was guided away by the clandestine ones to be placed in a cell for captured Providence generals, I and many other on-site scientists spent the next unbroken day and many afterward learning all we could to help communicate with our special guest. Word of the events here climbed our pecking order fast. Mere days later, as a direct action, our Prime Minister, 3 talented linguists, our nation's head of diplomacy numbering among them, were flown in to oversee communications. Chot, Zintral's head diplomat, was an intimidating man by all measures. Long black feathers atop his head stretched down nearly to the base of his tail. The muted bayonet scar carved across his snout emphasized his inky black eyes, a rare pigment mutation akin to single-pronged ears or an extra toe. On first glance, it was hard to believe someone like him could possibly be chosen as a diplomat. That said, one would be hard-pressed to deny his oratory talents. News broadcasts were simply too choppy to do his melodic voice justice. "Hello, Miss Vavi," he began, his eyes half closed in a gesture of professional cordiality. "I must sincerely thank you on behalf of Minister Salkim for playing diplomat in my absence, but I assure you we can pluck things up from here. Your fee of silence has already been transferred and a transport is waiting outside to return you home." The horrible realization conveyed through his smooth voice hit me like freezing water poured from a golden bucket. You can't just kick me out like that! I am sorry about this." Chot sighed, averting his gaze downward in a faux gesture of apology. "However, the simple fact is that we no longer have use for one like you when our information is obtainable straight from its source. All we need from you at this juncture will be silence." Feeling my life's aspirations slipping away from me, I opted for a more hardline approach. "And what if I don't give you that?" I asked. The diplomat's sudden sad laugh rattled me to my very core. "If that's the case, I'm afraid your reward money will have to wait until after the war to be spent." Immediately, a strong set of claws clamped down upon my shoulder, and just above it, the pinch of a needle in my neck sent through my system a wave of panic, followed shortly thereafter by an unassailable chemical lethargy. "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am, but national security is at stake here. Rest assured, you'll be released once this all blows over." And so, with my heart shaking itself asunder like a dying engine, I fell over and everything went dark.